Nice to meet you, sir.
Yes, nice to meet
Hello
you
and
too.
welcome. Hello and welcome. This is Ravina from The Hindu, and we are back with yet another webinar this Saturday. We do these webinars every Saturday as part of our education vertical. Sometimes we discuss key issues in education, sometimes we have webinars that have useful, helpful career tips and guidance for students. Today, we are here to discuss a very pertinent topic. We are here to talk about whether early childhood education should be regulated. Now, how exactly we landed on this topic is I was scrolling through my Instagram and I saw an advertisement which said, invest 8 or 12 lakh in our franchisee and you can earn 75 lakh a year. So that made me wonder. And then it is no surprise, right, that there are preschools propping up in every nook and corner in this country. And anyone who has some means, some money, capital, and space has the means to start a preschool. And a lot of these preschools are branded as, international curriculum, global pedagogy, premium. Such words are used for marketing these preschools. Now, at this time, I would like to point out that preschool education is a very important phase in a child's life, right? A lot of studies show that 50% of a child's brain development happens before the age of 5. So, this phase sort of shapes the child's emotional resilience, social behavior. This is not just about academic, it is also about intellectual curiosity. And in India, we have the youngest population as of now, but we also have increasing mental health concerns. So, what this webinar actually tries to explore is how do we ensure that preschool education or early childhood care is not compromised so that we have a flourishing youth for the future. So we have a fantastic set of panel today. We have Mr. Sethu Raman, who is the founder and CEO of BWise. We have Mr. Abhishek Chaudhary, who is an advocate. And we have Professor Ujjwal Chaudhary, who is the Pro Vice Chancellor of Techno India University. He's an educator and an author. So before we get into the nitty-gritties of the topic, I would like to throw the panel open for opening remarks and to actually ask them, requesting you all to establish what kind of preschool education system exists as of now, what kind of landscape is it in terms of how preschools operate and how they position themselves. Um, Sethuraman sir, would you like to go first?
Sure. Happy to. Thanks, Ravina, and happy to connect with the audience. So the way the preschool industry is currently structured is that getting to open a preschool has the only step of hurdles where an individual or an institution needs to get a few approvals to have the school coming in place. So it is to showcase a certain infrastructure, potentially one or two qualified teachers, and that's all it takes to get an approval. And once that approval is in place, there is no further checks thereafter. So, from an industry standpoint, that's probably the only barrier. Whether this child, there are enough children in the school, is there enough support? There is no such review, there is no self-assessment or an audit. So hence it's become an easier option compared to the K-12 structures, which has a lot more rigor in terms of schools being opened up, whichever syllabus it might be. So I would say, from a landscape point of view, I think you nicely mentioned that, Ravina, in your tee off. There's a lot more commercial focus rather than a learning outcome. It has become a business opportunity focus rather than saying this is how you're going to help the future of a country or a future of India, or a perspective like that. So purpose is a bit distorted in terms of how it's communicated. To top it up, I think there is a franchisee versus ROI. Like you mentioned, you invest so much, you get your returns in so much. I think there is a lot of that heavyweight. There is a lot of standardization that's coming in. The opportunity to innovate and make that cheaper, better, efficient, I think that's got lost somewhere in terms of the brand. Uh, and lastly, I would say the quality of implementation is very inconsistent. There are so many pedagogies, so many options of learning, but where it comes all together in terms of impacting the student is around the implementation. I think it's a little patchy, and that's how I would summarize it as in terms of where it stands today. And sure Professor Chowdhury and the two Professor Chowdhuries would probably have more to add on.
Huh. Yeah, Professor Chaudhary, would you like to go next?
Yeah, very well spoken by Mr. Setu. That there are points of worry, no doubt. In my opinion, this early education thing is becoming more a consumer product than a development commitment. That's not to brand everyone with the same stick. Having said that, the consumer product psychology is coming into a dominance with the edu entrepreneurs at the early education stage, because parents are extremely anxious and even aspirational. Many people start thinking, if I choose wrong at 3, will it be right at 13 or 23? I mean, there is too much of worry surrounding this early 2, 3, 4 years of age education of the child, and more particularly if it is the first child of the family. Then schools are competing in a crowded market. Seturamanji has spoken in a very detailed manner how very easily things can start in this category of education. And there is a crowded market, good, bad, everything. So how do you make a differentiation? So people start, giving jargons, international levels, global pedagogy, coding, STEM for a 4-year-old child, and things like that. And whether you love it or not, jargon travels faster than practice. It's always seen. So terms like Montessori, Reggio, Finnish model, IB, social emotional learning, and all these jargons, whether they're understood properly by the parents or not, they are enamored by it, and there is a reason behind it. So how does it threaten the educational integrity? Yes, finally you actually are teaching to the brochure and not to the child. So you're going by the things that you promise on the brochure. So it's, and even you conduct demo schools, you showcase some demonstrative classes and demo schools, the demo class for the parents sometimes, which is not what you promise. Then there are short term admission pressures. There is the ROI thing with the franchisee, as has been rightly said. There is a fatigue for teachers that come up due to that constant introduction of flashy jargons, USPs, and things like that. I would also like to focus on a fear-based messaging. If your child doesn't start learning English speaking, leadership skills, coding at this age, then he will fall back. This sort of messaging is also creating a lot of trouble, especially for the neo-rich parents who may not be highly educated. Even the education may be in somewhere else, some other area. So for them, this fear psychosis is also important. There is a misalignment often between promise and practice. So low teacher child ratio. Then where what you see is a 30 student and one teacher. Now this 30 is to 1 is good for university. Even there UGC talks about 20 or 22, but not at all in the early childhood. Staff moral and ethics keep drifting often. So, therefore, I would like to say that there is a challenge in the context of the early education. However, I would also like to say that branding and marketing by itself and in all cases are not the villain. For example, if you articulate your philosophy truthfully, it's fine. If you say we are a play-based, developmentally, sort of appropriate, relationship-driven early school education institute, it's still good. And there has to be therefore uh, a change of philosophy. You are marketing and integrity. Your marketing must actually showcase what is on ground, and not or the truth, or the lived experience on campus, and not a fantasy. The fantasy should not be marketed. Now this is a challenge. So pedagogy first brand, or brand first pedagogy, that's the debate. I would like to say pedagogy first brand. We can explain that later in the next round. Back to you.
Yeah, yeah, very interesting remarks, sir. Thank you so much. Abhishek, sir, would you like to go next?
I agree with Seth Chaudhary and Sethubraman sir. But what the thing is that in today's market, like in India, it is rapidly growing. These preschools are positioning themselves as essential for a child's holistic development and school readiness. Now you will see that in every town there are hundreds of preschools. Like in my town only, there are 20 to 30 preschools. Aren't they providing facilities to the children, to the preschools, I mean, to the ages? We should first think about that. And the fact is that working parents, they are they are reading those children in these schools. They are trying to admit their students in this course, while we are thinking about that these preschools are actually, they are bothering or not, or they are actually taking care of those children or not. Aren't these are making markets for the entrepreneurs? Or it's a, now we can see that it has become an assured returns for the new entrepreneurs. But the thing is that every preschools are uh, making those consumers and others, like these children, to students and parents of children are becoming consumers of these preschools. And later we will discuss about all those topics. Now,
Thank you so much, sir. So coming to my next question, it is a bit broad. The question will be a bit broad, but what are the long-term consequences of treating preschool as a business proposition? Can we talk about both the positives and the negatives? Sethu Raman, sir.
Sure, sure. So, I mean, actually, like everything else, there is definitely positives as well, because at the end of the day, the, there is good progress from a child's perspective in certain cases. So, I would say the positives would be there is a accelerated growth or expansion of the number of institutions that spring up, which is in the neighborhood. Hence, every neighborhood has a preschool which the parents can lean on, because I think Professor Chaudhary rightly pointed about the anxiety of parents. One of the anxieties is always, can I have something next door? Because my child should not travel a lot more. So, a lot of these springing up next door, there is a lot of value out there. So, I would say accelerated growth and expansion is a positive. In addition to that, given the fact that some institutions are charging much higher than the others, there is a pressure on innovation to come through at the higher end, because they will not be able to justify their fees. They have to create things of value to justify that fees, and hence there would be innovation. That's also a positive. Besides, the most important point, they take away the burden on the state or the government to be able to stand up, because given our size of population, the government alone probably is going to struggle to bring up the level of infrastructure that's required for a child's success. So I think all of that, these I would see as positives. But on the other side of the coin, I think there are challenges. Challenges meaning there would be inequality, and there would be social emissions that will happen, because again, the anxiety is to get associated with a better brand. Hence, there is an issue around uh, inequality that will just continue to grow, and not that we have any less of it today. It might just become bigger progressively. And I will go back to the bigger fundamental. I think there is a diffusion in the purpose. A preschool focus should be, how do we make our children of the future extremely supported in their development and growth. I think if we start to make it a commercial business, the focus gets shifted elsewhere, and there is a dilution in the purpose of the industry in itself. So I think there must be some solid reasons to make that come back to its core purpose. I think we should take the responsibility of creating the children that we would like to bring to this world tomorrow in terms of the thinking and the behaviors. Of course, there is an impact on, if you make it as a business, the other, what happens is the most important member in this whole value chain is the teacher, is the one who's the educating that child. Then he or she becomes a commodity, and that's very unfair. Those are the ones who are adding the substantial value. So if you only look at it as a business lens, that teacher's value would get diluted. I think these would be the positives and negatives, the way in the lens that I am seeing it, Ravina and both the Chaudhry sirs.
Ujwal sir, would you like to talk from your end about the positives and the negatives?
Negatives and positives of early education initiatives that are coming
Treating
up
it
around
as
all
a
around.
business,
Oh,
of
teaching it as a
treating it as
business.
a business.
Yeah, yeah. After all, um if there is an investment, there has to be a recovery. In that sense, everything is an everything is a business. If it is a government initiative, then the investment is by the taxpayer at the discretion of the government machinery, and there the returns are of different type. But I presume that you are talking in the context of private initiatives in early education. In that, there is an investment of the space, the materials, the teachers, the branding, everything together. So has to be an approach which is business, but then business can be of different types. This is a business which deals with people's mind, people's growth, children's mind and children's growth. So it has to be substantive and not just a claim based business, not an aggressively marketed claim based business. Even hospital is a business. Obviously, education is a business, but business is not a dirty word. The point is, the purpose of this business is not profit maximization. The purpose of this business is first to impact the lives of the children in a very positive and substantive manner. Yes, covering the cost and ideally making a little surplus which can go back to the business again. So, with this approach, the first thing that is important is a substantive approach in early education. Like, for example, the teacher's behavior. Teachers should be speaking with the children and not at them. There is a very big difference between speaking with the children. So, you speak one on one, even if you're talking to 10. And that is an art. That is an art, even at senior education. I'm in university. So, it's an art to speak to a group of youths, yet everyone feels that you are speaking to him or her only. So that's the point. And there should be an attempt to actually give a lots of choice and freedom to explore within the clear boundaries, but explore for the child. And for example, the teacher should be largely asking open-ended question. What do you think will happen if this is this? If something dot dot. One given situation. So this is the point. And the classroom environment itself, more than just colorful furniture, child-sized furniture, very inquisitive style, differential designs, and not very standardized uniform one, accessible materials, shelves which are also the shelves also teach the way the shelves are designed. Mixed use spaces like a reading corner, a block and build corner, or maybe an art area, dramatic play. So there should be mixed use spaces. The children's work and thinking process should be displayed more rather than standard uniform things which are like bookish, where there is no heart in it. If the child's art is displayed, if the child's work is displayed of something they have made with sand or let's say paper or even mud, clean, nice, clear mud or duff, if they've made something, that is to be displayed. And no huge amount of, let's say, worksheets and memory tests and all, as minimum as possible. If they recite a poem or a rhyme, there is some memory in it. But then, and this whole kinetic involvement, people involving the children in games and activities and all that, that has to be much more. And no evaluation like ABCD grade 1 to 10 marks and nothing like that. More like through how they do. One another important management principle I would like to bring here: we often commit a mistake as leaders by scolding people or team members in front of others, and even sometimes appreciating in person. The opposite should be done. Even as small children, they should be appreciated, and everyone has some positives. The positives have to be appreciated in front of others. They have to be told not to compete but support each other, collaborate. And if there is a mistake, that mistake has to be mentioned in person. A little scold may be required once in a while, but that's more in person. So while it is business and there's nothing wrong, this business has to have soul at the center, heart at the center, and not profit at the center. Back to you.
Thank you, sir. Yeah, business is not a dirty word, like you said, but a child's well being and growth should also be looked upon and taken care of. We have some questions coming in. So, next, I was going to ask Mr. Abhishek, sir, anyway, about what kind of regulations exist and how this can be regulated. But we do have a question coming in from Anshika Chaudhary. And she says, should early education business be strictly regulated by the government? Do strict regulations harm the growth of private early education businesses? Are parents' reviews more reliable than government inspections for regulating early education centers? Do regulations prevent innovative teaching methods in early education? Abhishek sir, would you first talk about the first question? Her first question: should it be regulated? And before that, what kind of regulations exist as of now?
Yes, first of all, I would like to say that many policies has been undertaken by the government, but still now nothing has been implemented properly. If it will be implemented properly, then these preschools can incorporate, or there's some state level regulations, and even if it comes under a it comes under one umbrella, then it can be uh, much more better than nowadays. Uh, 2012 Supreme Court ruling established that institutions should not operate for profit, influencing preschool operations like national education policies in 2020, where it has been found in foundational stage 3 to 8 emphasizes quality early childhood education. But these policies are being made by the government, but still now it has not been implemented properly. That's why every preschools who does not falls under that not for profit, and these preschools are running at a high value as if there is no certain rules and regulations to be followed by them.
Oh, okay, sir. Thank you, sir. To our viewers, I would like to say that those of you who ask the three best questions, we will be giving you a free subscription to the Hindu Online for 3 months. So keep those questions coming in and also drop your email IDs here, or you can email them at education@thehindu.co.in so we can reach out to you for subscriptions. Coming to next question of Anshika, Seturaman sir and Ujjwal sir, maybe you can take these. Do strict regulations harm the growth of private early education businesses? Are parents' reviews more reliable than government inspections? And do regulations prevent innovative teaching methods in early education?
Setu sir, please.
Yes, sir. Yeah, thank you. Can I just have the questions online, Ravina,
Yeah,
just in case you don't miss it? Yeah,
yeah.
thank you. Yeah. So, to the question on will the regulations harm the growth of private? I think regulation should be very balanced. You can't have a regulation that actually micromanages everything that education will deliver on the ground in preschools. So, it has to be more guidelines or handrails that should be provided for. If it is very strict, then it will become very bureaucratic in nature. There should be some level of self-assessment allowed. If you look at, regulations exist on hotel industry. You give a 5 star, 1 star, 2 star. There is a certain level of regulation. I think we have to look at education in a far more bigger sense than that. So essential for regulations, but at a fair level of support. It should be more supportive regulation and not control-oriented regulation. Then it will not harm. If it is a very control-oriented mindset, it will potentially become very bureaucratic. Parent reviews. I mean, we are in the business in bwise.in working with parents. I can tell you, parents, they want to read everybody's reviews, but parents don't give reviews very willingly because they're afraid of consequences or they're afraid of something else in terms of from a social media perspective. So we don't see that coming in. And with very few reviews, no parent can actually make good quality decisions for themselves. So it becomes even harder for the government to make any regulation around the parents' reviews. So I would say parent reviews is good to have, but that shouldn't influence governance in any structure. And as far as innovative teaching methods, regulation is more about being at a certain minimal standards. After that, there is no regulation. You can always get better. If you look at any any organization in business today, there are only certain expectations on how you will run it. After that, how you make it the world's best is left to the institution. So regulations will not, for want of better words, they will not stall improvements or innovation in early education. It will directly be, the purpose will define how effective it becomes. The teachers will make that happen at a ground level, and it's not the regulation. That would be my perspective based on everything that we have learned.
Ujwal, sir?
Very well said, Satu sir. In fact, I also believe on that, that a very minimal regulation should be there. Actually, if you think in terms of regulation, the process can be somewhat regulated and not too much of paperwork. Unfortunately, in India, educational regulation historically obsesses over inputs and documents. I'm in higher education. I know what is AICTE, UGC, NIRF, and NAC regulations and recognitions. They focus too much on building plan, fire, NOC, lease papers, registers, which should be there. I'm not against it. But coming to the level of what is the size of the director's cabin, I mean, I can show you AICTE rules on that. 120 square feet. What's the hell if it is 100 square feet? So anyway, so such things should actually not be the focus, can be a peripheral thing. The focus has to be on what children actually experience between 9 a.m. to 1 p.m., depending on the time of the preschool. So mandatory focus should be on the adult-child interaction, the warmth, responsiveness, language richness, and this whole focus on teaching English at age of 2. And I do not personally agree to that. I mean, the first level of instruction should be in the mother tongue. Yes, English alphabet slowly also can be introduced, but the whole focus only on English, just to show that we are smarter and more aggressive, or rather more evolved, more developed, more global, is another wrong aspect. Then play-based routine, choice time, outdoor play, pretend play, stories, conversation. Now, these should be what should be documented and seen. Child-teacher ratio and groups is very, very important. The ratio when the child is 2 or 3 years and the ratio when the child is 4 or 5 years are very different. And the focus has to be on inclusion, safety, and emotional climate more and more. I mean, some basic annual self-declaration on paperwork, and usually on the digital platform, some photos, sample week routines, the one video class, video classroom practice sample. This can be there and put up on the regulators platform digitally. But the focus has to be less on process, less on bureaucratic norms, and more on the process. And use regulation as a support, not as a control. I think Sethunamanji also told that. So the inspector himself herself has to be the mentor, in a way. The whole purpose is we'll catch you doing wrong is very, very wrong perspective. The policeman, you are here almost like to support, mentor the system. That's the point. And if every regulatory requirement links to a specific support, then ask the staff to have a government low-cost state-sponsored certificate or diploma. There is a DLED, by the way, the Diploma in Elementary Education. I run a school in Sundarban area, but that's not a commercial school. This pay only 200 rupees fees per head per month. It is through donations of large number of ex-students and friends. It's for 350 children of fishermen and agricultural laborers. And I do see DLED as a qualification and graduation as the minimum before admitting a teacher. I do agree to that. This is basic. But I emphasize later on, after the appointment is done, not on paperwork anymore, but on how it is being delivered. So outdoor, that low-cost play spaces, creation of that, inspector as mentor, as I said. So there should be peer observation and inspector observation together. So this sort of, and how you can keep the whole operation risk free, as much as possible risk free. Yes, there should be non-negotiable aspects of safety, like building, fire, child protection, health, hygiene, ratio and group size, no corporal punishment, no emotional abuse, zero tolerance to this. This should be completely non-negotiable. But light touch, for curriculum documentation, display boards, fancy materials, not so much required. New, so these are the basically, and transparency with the parents. Instead of the file power, let there be a parents power. And I do take the point noted by Setu sir, that many parents themselves are not competent enough, or they are scared to write negative feedback on social media. Otherwise the child may be ignored in the school or whatever. But at least the philosophy, daily routine, ratios, fee structure, staff training, things like discipline, assessment, inclusion, all these should be actually transparently communicated to the parents. That's what I'll say. Yes, we can talk about what can be an ideal regulatory approach. We can talk as we go ahead. Back to you.
Thank you, sir. So I think both Setu sir and Ujjwal sir have touched upon a parent's role here, and that brings me to my next question to Setu sir. You interact with parents on an everyday basis. So what kind of misconceptions or doubts do they have when it comes to their choice of enrolling their child in a preschool?
Um, so, based on what we understand through our interactions and what we read up everywhere else, I can contextually put it as for okay. Let me rephrase this. The perspectives can be looked at in three different lenses. One is the perception itself. First, how parents perceive preschool education. In this, there are a couple of points. Then it is about what are they focusing. The second point about what do they want as an outcome. What is their focus areas? That I think there is some misconceptions. And the third one is about how transactional they are, which means that it's more to do with how do they manage the outcomes based on how they finally end up making their decisions. So let me elaborate this a little. In terms of perceptions, sometimes assuming that all preschools are the same, assuming that a great brand means a fantastic preschool. Uh, Everybody teaches to a curriculum, and here I think is very important. There is no consistent curriculum at all for preschools. There are a few recommended pedagogies, and it's picked up. The NEP has picked this up very well actually now, but the implementation, as was mentioned earlier, is quite weak. So the assumption that they all teach a specified curriculum. The perception that all teachers operating in a preschool are very well qualified. Having a daycare also means that the school is very good. They have thought through everything from top to end in terms of the operational requirements, all of these at one end, but the other end also that every child is the same. If the other child is getting these benefits, my child will also get these benefits. All of that, or like we also mentioned earlier, international brand means that they're doing something world class. Higher fees means that these are doing everything that they have to do, they're already doing in an unregulated environment. So I think these are perception related challenges that parents usually overlook or they don't understand. And to be fair, nobody in our curriculum, we don't teach parenting, right? Parenting is something that we all, once we have a child, have been in the same journey. You learn along the way as you become a parent, and then you're talking to people, getting some advice, and working through your perceptions. So I think there is some level of perspectives that parents carry there as misgivings. And then when it comes to the other end, which is the more critical end, where what parents focus on, the assumption that great brands means great outcomes, uh, assuming that a good brand is guaranteeing quality to me, good, like Professor alluded to it earlier, good English speaking staff means that my child will automatically get that benefit from day one. Um, all teachers are very well trained. STEM based education that Abhishek sir alluded to earlier means that you're going to teach everything to my child at that young an age. These are prioritization challenges that parents have and some misgivings. There are some misinterpretations here. And lastly, when it comes to transaction, finally, sometimes I see it as a one-time effort, right? It's a one-time effort from me. Once I put my child through a preschool, then I'm sorted until grade whatever, grade 1 or grade 12 or whatever it is. And second one is around it's a fair price. I'm paying for preschool. I don't need to be getting any communication from the school, and I don't have to be involved. School takes care. I think there is a, I think Professor Chowdhury alluded to, there must be a good level of communication between the school and the parent at that early stage, so that collectively the ownership of the child's development can be seen through. So I would say these are the areas of misconceptions. But having said that, I don't think I would say everybody has this. There are some who have it. Usually the challenge is more when you've been educated in an environment which has been very different to the one. All of us want our children to be better, doing better than where we were. Hence we always look to put our child into better places than we went to. And in that process sometimes there is a lack of knowledge on what is the right thing to do, and the brand takes over, or the brochure takes over, like Professor said earlier. Sometimes the brochure says it all, and then we assume what is said is being implemented. We forget that the everyday experience and the supportive teacher staff actually carries a lot more weightage than any brand that can impact for a child. That would be areas of, or of perspectives that parents should watch out for. Both, I mean, uh, my learning over the last few years.
Thank you, sir. We have a question from S. Liaquat Ali, who says, what type of monitoring mechanism should be developed to evaluate the preschooling in terms of local pedagogy, infrastructure, and qualified teachers? Abhishek, sir, would you like to take a shot at this?
Yes, like now the standards should be maintained in those preschools. Like inconsistent now, you see that every preschools not following the standards properly. There is some regulatory gaps, and there is some fragmented governance and lack of qualified teachers. First of all, we should properly follow up those rules by providing qualified educators. That will be first and foremost things for all the preschools that are setting up. Actually, we are focusing on the child's education. Then why should not be we should appoint qualified educators first in order to start that preschools.
Okay, Ujjwal, sir, would you like to weigh in on this?
The regulatory aspect or the parents aspect? There are
Monitoring.
two.
How can monitoring? Either if you want, if you have something to say about both the questions.
Yeah, on the monitoring thing, I mean, monitoring, there can always be school, I mean, teachers, student, parents, some committee that's there in schools anyway, and that can be one way of monitoring. The other way of monitoring is also with respect to government regulations. Yes, in government, this DLED, at least I find in some states of India, diploma in elementary education, as a basic qualification that's allowed after class 12 itself, basic qualification to be a teacher at the preschool. So I think that could be a minimum standard on education, though you cannot therefore hire a class 8 or 10 pass just like that, because बच्चों को ही पढ़ाना है, to teach the kids, so what. So therefore there has to be a minimum qualification. That's also on one. Second point is scope and categories must be well defined. Now, all 2 years to 6 year or 5 year old, all cannot be, and all types with 10 students to a chain and everything cannot be all same type. There are standalone private preschools. There are preschool sections of K-12 to schools, larger schools, preschool section. Then there are NGO community run early learning centers, informally or formally. Then there are corporate daycare centers that do preschool programming also. So there are home-based micro centers, less than 15 or 20 children. Small centers, let's say 20 to 60 children. Large centers above 60, chains. So the systems, or what you call rules, cannot be exactly the same for all. Yes, there should be some licensing, but licensing without safety cannot be given. There's no license without safety, no continued license without quality. So there is a concept of basic license and a regular license. So let's say provisional license, 0 to 2 years. and above 2 years, if the institute is continuing, then full license. But then the provisional license only when the safety norms are met. So the safety, and it could be everything: building stability, self declaration, basic structure, fire safety, child proofing, toilets, drinking water, open part of the campus, closed part of the campus. So these sort of basic things must be completely maintained, monitored. Proof of legal entity, that it's an identity of the owner, child protection policy cleared. If the institute has covered 2 years or more, let's say, and that can be reviewed maybe every 5 years. Let's say, and that can be reviewed maybe every 5 years. Let's say child teacher ratios in group size, staff qualifications and ongoing training, evidence of play based child centered practices, all those should be there in the regular license thing. Complaint incident log maintained and addressed, digital single window portal. So this sort of things can come there. And surely staffing, child teacher ratio, staff qualification, I've said this must be monitored from time to time. And digital single window can help doing that. On the parental issue, I can come back later, but this is on what I think on
Okay.
ideal regulation
Um,
or monitoring.
okay. Setu Raman sir, would you have something to say about this?
Yeah, I mean, I also think it'll be quite random if somebody goes and asks to be monitoring. So you will need a governance structure for that monitoring. So once that regulation or that governance structure comes in, I think it's pretty useful to bring that monitoring. But if it has to be independently done, then I think there must be sort of a parent involvement with the institution, so that collectively that institution can start to monitor and deliver. Otherwise, currently there is no regulation in this segment, and hence monitoring will have to come in as a follow through from regulation. The franchise structure has some level of monitoring, but that is more finding faults rather than finding opportunities of coaching and in improvement, and is the way I would see it. But they have definitely got some structure of monitoring because it's a franchise based structure, it's a brand that gets into impact. I think they do have. But when you look at individual schools, I don't think it exists currently, and regulation will have to provide. But having said that, I will also take the other lens. If at a country level, if you look at financial institutions, you have a AAA rating from CRISIL and a five-star restaurant, seven-star Michelin restaurant, whatever we have, or we have ratings for so many different organizations. It can be done as a regulatory requirement and ratings even at a educational level. I think the intent and the direction from the governance structure will have to drive it rather than monitoring at an individual school level.
Thank you, sir. We have an interesting question. Dinesh Gupta says, when we say school or preschool, does it include online school, which is of late becoming very popular? So I have heard a lot about this. There are some online preschools, but also I received a very interesting survey some days ago, and the survey said that parents are more inclined towards play-based learning than online learning. But when
Yes.
we talk about online learning, in this case, if there at all is online learning happening, how do we look at that?
Yeah. So I will tell you
Can I take it?
from the. Yeah,
Yeah.
please go ahead. Sir. Please go ahead.
No, no, no. It's okay. It's okay. Anyone, either way.
No, no, please go ahead. You started off, so I wouldn't want to stop you.
Okay. Thank you. So I feel for such small children, online is not the right way, unless unless a COVID type of induced situation is there. That's a completely unusual situation. In normal case, online is not the right way. Playful. See, there is a social relationship also with the madam, with the mentor, with the miss, and also among children, the friendship among children, the whole energy of celebrating birthdays together. If there are a total of 60 or 100 children, almost one birthday every 2 3 days, so that sort of things. And then to develop kinetic energy, recognition of colors and everything, the physical shapes and sizes, to understand such things, you actually need to meet physically, touch and feel, and see the candor and the care among your mentors. So there, it's absolutely right that on merely or purely online cannot be a, early education for children. Blended in some form, maybe at times, maybe one day a week or something, and that also not at age 2 3, maybe a little 4 5 onwards. That's about it. On the parents, the earlier issue, I'd like to make a few comments here. In fact, parents associate, these words global and international and certain yes, as Setu just said, there are systems and certain SOP, standard operating processes in place. But not always necessarily in every institute, in every center promises the same quality. That's one. And secondly, franchisee chains are often given, some ready-made marketing vocabulary, whereas implementation is on local training, staff quality, the way it is actually practiced. So lived experience versus vocabulary becomes a scenario. These words, Reggio, Montessori, these are not trademarked in any countries, in most countries rather, and therefore they are used with minimal fidelity. So you can see a Montessori school with plastic toys instead of Montessori materials, or worksheets and tracing books even in nursery, which is not actually allowed in Montessori and should not be ideally done. Teacher-led drilling versus self-directed work. So it's the whole feeling towards taking your own responsibility should be the primary thing, not instruction-based or order-based drilling. Like Reggio-inspired school, someone says, but walls are colorful, but not documentation of learning is there. The colorful walls are not teaching anything for that matter. Projects are one of craft activities, not long-term, investigations. So these are some of the challenges that we see in case of. So I would like to strongly say that the parents also need a little schooling in parenting. So while parents teachers association or body can be there, it can meet once in a month, and after the general discussion, there could be one invited speaker, an expert like Sethuraman sir, speaking on the right approach to early childhood parenting. So this sort of things should actually make the parents more cued in, rather than on the lookout in the lookout for finding faults or all that. So it's actually, the purpose is not fault finding. The purpose is to do it better, to make the child happier child, more engaged in a safe space, and too much of intellectual requirements are not there at that age. Back to you.
Thank you, sir. Sethu Raman, sir.
Yeah, just wanted to reconfirm that we work with. I mean, there are more than 10,000 schools that are registered on our platform. There is no preschool that is online, as we know. COVID was a situational requirement, so I think if you take that away, there is we don't know of any school that is online for the preschool category. There are people who get to tuitions, and there are social emotional support that is provided one on one. Those can be online, but there are individual requirements. There is no schooling as a generic support. That's in the cities that we operate. We haven't seen that, Ravina and everybody else on the webinar.
Okay. Thank you, sir. We have a question from Likhayat Ali again, who says that DEIED and preschool DEIED are two different courses. DEIED course for elementary education, preschool educations are not designed yet. So, asking whether you can throw light on this. Is this
Yeah,
something
I
we can?
use this. Yeah, I use this word, so I'm answering that yes, DL Ed is not specifically as of today, not specifically for preschool. It is for preschool and up to class 5 primary education, the overall. Whether some states have made a preschool DL Ed, I am not aware, but in the DL Ed course, preschool component is there. Preschool component is there. So if someone has done DL Ed, I am reasonably confident that the person at least knows by concepts and a little practice of the concept, because practicals are also done. So a little practice of the concepts of what things to be done, like playful learning process, that sort of interactive learning. So the people know this at least before they start their job. So I would like to say that In absence of a purely preschool DLED, the existing DLED is good enough to start, which is good for preschool and also primary school. That's all.
Okay, okay, thank you, sir. Abhishek, sir, we spoke about, the absence of regulations and how it can be monitored, how it can be monitored. But I want to ask that, if at all we try to develop a framework, a regulatory framework, what kind of legal hurdles might come in the way?
There are certain legal hurdles, like policies are there, but it has not been implemented. Like I have said earlier also, like there should be education is both in center and state list. That means it is a concurrent list, and both center and state must make a step to control, to regulate those preschools. Like central must follow a policy, but make a policy to regulate those schools, and the state must also implement those policies which the center makes it. Likewise, then only we can regulate those preschools. Back to you.
Okay, thank you, sir. Um, Pushpa Singh asks, do urban and rural children have equal access to early education? If not, how will inequality reduce? Can we talk about the urban rural divide here?
Sure. I mean, I'll share my perspective.
Setu sir.
Yeah.
Uh, and- yeah, I'll share my perspective, and please, everybody else, I'm sure, can add in. There is, whether we like it or not, there is a differentiation. The per capita income is different. The perspective of education and support is different, and hence uh, there is going to be differential in terms of the organizations that operate. But if you have a governance structure that establishes the basic minimum structure, let's say we have a regulation that says this is the minimum that has to happen. Like, for example, we do in CBSE schools. We said this is the minimum and this is how it will work. I think that should be a good start. So, your starting point, there is a lot of commonality, and from there on, it will build. Second, there is also going to be the ability to pay. The private institutions will have a bigger audience and hence a bigger population to cater to in an urban environment versus something in a rural structure. Hence, I think there will also be those differentials that, as it exists currently, will continue to show up. But what would definitely happen is if there is a minimum standard established, we can ensure that that child that we are grooming in the early education can walk in into any school with that minimum standard. I think that is the way we should approach this. Whether there will be a differential, I suspect we are going to live with that differential between urban and rural, at least in certain parts of education.
Okay. Ujjwal sir, you can also talk about, your
Yeah, yeah.
experiment in Sundarban. Yeah.
Yes, yes, yes. I do agree that just like there is a digital divide in society, there is a economic divide in society. There is also early education access divide in also in the society. It's rural and urban. It's slum and elite urban. There are different forms. It's small town and metropolitan. There are large amount of differences in all these dualities. So having said this, this is no wonder in a country which is increasingly having concentration of wealth, power, everything in fewer and fewer hands. So it is but natural that there will be a very small section with an immense access to resources, a reasonably large section with average access to resources, and a larger section with minimal access to resources. This will always be there. So that's one. Second, I do agree with Seturamanji that there has to be some common minimum requirements. So common minimum requirements, largely focusing on the fundamentals connected to the safety of the child, emotional and physical. If that is ensured and certain quality standards are given, then everyone develops on their own is fine. That's the next point. The third point that I'd like to bring here is that the emphasis on, particularly in the urban centers, emphasis on only learning English from age 2 is not a very right thing. the whatever is the Indian language in whichever country. I would not only say one language, and don't believe that our constitution does not speak about a national language and does not speak about uniform, doesn't speak about singularity of one language over others. So therefore, whichever is the local language, and I do not want to use the word vernacular, which is a derogatory term used in the English period, English era, so British era. So the local language, the local Indian language, has to have an important role, primacy role, a role of primacy, and then the English. So that's another point with respect to urban rural, because often it is found that the rural preschools and primary schools are dominant with the local language, and urban preschools and primary schools are dominant with the English language. The focus must be on the fundamental of relationship building, understanding colors, understanding sizes, emotional stability. These must precede, and then a bit of numbers, a bit of alphabets, recognizing alphabets, and then gradually into writing, learning, arithmetic fundamental at age 4 and 5. So there should be such gradual growth, and these basic gradual growth parameters must be noted, which urban and rural both can follow. Having said this, most of the government schools at the primary, pre-primary, if I can call this as pre-primary level, is still wanting in resources and wanting in practices, right practices. The current the new education policy talks about pre-primary in a big way. There are several years given to pre-primary and primary. Having said that, in fact, 5 years strong. So, having said that, the policy is very appreciative, while the implementation of it has hardly been seen. So, it is and this discussion you are doing also is in largely in the context of the privately run pre-primary or early elementary education. Even the institutes which are on the platform of Setu Ramanji's portal and ecosystem are also largely privately run, if I'm not wrong. So there has to be some sort of uniformity with respect to the fundamentals there, which he has rightly said. And differentiation will be there because of purchasing power and access to resources being very different from extreme hinterland to metropolitan India. Back to you.
Thank you, sir. I would like to take our last question for the day. We are almost about to close. Praveen Chandrasekhar asks, are homeschooling approved and can we make children grow based on that curriculum? What are pros and the cons? Any one of you?
Setu sir, Abhishek ji, I have been speaking last. So let me speak the last.
No worries. These days there is a huge demand. I won't say demand is probably the wrong word. There is a huge level of interest that is growing in homeschooling. Even in urban cities, we can see that. In the rural past, it used to be there, but now growing substantially in urban cities. And the methodology of teaching is different. But having said that, they do cover the curriculum differently as well. And so I'll focus as far as this webinar is concerned. We're talking early education. So in early education, pretty much everybody does their own curriculum. There is no standardized curriculum, and hence even for the open schools or as we speak about homeschooling, it is the very basics that are taught as long as the child is able to get to the three letter words and four letter words and frame up sentences and talk about colors like was mentioned earlier, or talk about shapes. I think that's the kind of content that is taught. So they've been able to build it successfully. Now, is it any better or is it any worse? I think it's a very debatable question. They all eventually end up writing the same exams when they get down to the grades that matter. So, homeschooling in India is approved. If that's where we're going, there is no problem with that, as long as they're able to take the exams that certifies them to have got cleared off the grades, but that's much senior. Preschool, there is no such regulation. When the child walks into a school for grade 1, which is also the part of what the NEP is specified, you need to have certain level of knowledge at that age besides the specified age factor. As long as you have that, schools will give you the admissions. So There is no challenge around that. Uh, the in pros and cons, I think the anxiety of the parent would be quite a big challenge in itself, I would say, if you're sending your child to the home school, because you don't know whether this is the right thing for your child or not. So it will depend on the environment of that child. Uh, I would say it will depend on the child as much as well. I don't think you can generalize it as a pro and con for the entire society. I think it will be more individual specific, and it might be the interest of that specific family in conversation. And then it becomes easier to say what's pro or con for them. I will leave it at that, and Professor Chowdhury and Abhishek sir probably would have a lot more insights into that.
Yeah, Abhishek sir, do you have anything to say about homeschooling, and is it allowed?
Homeschooling, I would like to say that it is allowed, but you have to be. ma- ma- First thing is that you have to be properly uh, standardize those things which are uh, properly needed for the children for in the school preschools that which is a which is our topic today. But last of all, we must say that proper governance must also be there and proper regulations must also be there to set up those schools, and parents and teachers must also communicate in these things.
Thank you, sir. Ujjwal sir.
Right. Yes, yes. Homeschooling is something that's a big debate. One of my friends, both husband and wife in Singapore, had left their jobs, have come back, went back to their roots, which is in Uttarakhand, and is homeschooling their two children. One is in a preschool stage, the other is in school stage. Now, this homeschooling sits right at the sort of fault line between three rights: the parents' right to choose, the child's right to a good education and safe childhood, and the state's duty to ensure both. So, if you take the legal part of it, because that's one of the points you asked, parents' right to choose, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights says that parents do have the right for a prior right, sort of, to choose the kind of education that shall be given to the children. Children's right to education and development, UN Convention on Rights of the Child, UNCRC, very well known. This also says that the child has a right to education and states must make primary education compulsory and available free for all. Our right to education has actually called for free and compulsory education up to 14 years. So if someone does it at home, there are many actually courts and government affidavits which have shown, clarified that schooling cannot be illegal. Yes, it is not a regulated one, unregulated, apparently unclear, ambiguous, but it's not illegal. So parents may choose schooling. The state must still ensure the child's right to real effective education, and child is not a possession. The best interests are the ultimate test. This is one part. The other part is what are the goods and bads, rights and wrongs. On the rights, it's a personalized pace and method in homeschooling. So, one size fits all is negated here. It's flexible, human schedules and solutions of timings and all, depending on the parents' timings as well. And families can schedule their learning around health issues, travel plans, parents' work patterns. Child can avoid some of the stress of high stake, testing, excessive homework, long commute, travel, because travel is sometimes, yes, in preschool they do normally in close vicinity. Safe space for children who don't fit in the mainstream schools, particularly if the child has some in the spectrum, the spectrum disorder, if there is ADHD or early signs of autism or things like that. If the child wants to avoid bullying and discrimination, if there are special needs, if remote locations, poor schools, very poor children. So in such cases, homeschooling has actually been very good and develop stronger family and values also. But then there are challenges. Educational quality and narrow exposure. Parents are not trained teachers usually. So also poor socialization, meeting, making friends and all. Limited teamwork experience. Usually it's one child, sort of thing, or two children of different age groups. So not typically peer group. Narrow worldview possibility. Safeguarding. Sometimes certain other risks are also there. Equity and gender burden, it often comes to the mother and becomes an unpaid role of the mother, and may also compromise with her career. So there is uh, you know uh, there's a problem there. Many working class families may want homeschool, but they lack time, space, resource. There's a class gap therefore in homeschool. System level blind spots are also there. Government and educational planners are largely um, unclear about it. There's unclear data on out of school children, difficulty in monitoring learning outcomes, challenges in planning and infrastructure, teachers, budgets, everything. So there are challenges here. If you ask what can be a balanced approach, not very clear, but I'm giving some broad ideas. Recognize homeschooling as a legitimate pathway. Must clear legal recognition must be there, and within that, some registration, optional diversity, some basic norms must be also put forth by the state. But light touch can be there, but oversight should be there, and guaranteed re-entry and support if the child wants to come back to schools, regular schools, that must be there. And listening to the child, and if his or her own issues must surely be mentioned. In closing comment, I would like to say in this rural school that I run with 350 children in Sundarbans, there is a large number of children at nursery, lower KG, upper KG before class 1 starts. Class 1 is 5 or 6 age, but usually 6 age. But below 6 is this. And in this, we have formal schooling, they come to the school. But we are actually focusing on games, poetry, music, dance, a lot of beautiful dances they give. I have loads of videos on that, and role playing, role playing, and few things that normally you should learn about your environment because it's in Sundarban environment, about trees, plants, animals, natural disasters, and basic things, some things like that, and a lot of painting, artwork, learning colors, basics of alphabet, basics of numbers, body parts, naming body parts. So we focus largely on these, and these are done less, almost no marks based or grade based evaluation, but learning competence. Okay, minimum competence has been acquired, so promote to the next class. So this way, minimum competence, and the idea is that everyone should actually have that competence by the end of 1 year. So this has been the practice. From class 1 we have exams also, along with other practical things. Back to you.
Thank you, sir. This was really an insightful discussion. We talked about, what kind of preschool market exists as of now, and that business is not necessarily a dirty word, as Ujwal sir said, and Sethu sir pointed out that we should the purpose of early childhood education should not be diffused in the long term. And we also talked about what good comes when this is a business driven thing, the positives and the negatives of it, the legality of it, the if there has to be monitoring, what kind of monitoring should be done, homeschooling. We have touched upon a lot of things, so I hope people revisit this webinar as and when I'm sure it will be relevant. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank
Thank you
you,
very much. Have a good
and
evening.
Thank you,
nice
sir.
meeting the other gentlemen as well.